the THPRD Board of Directors meetings for October 12th, 2022. Jessica, will you please take roll?
Felicita Monteblanco.
Here.
Barbie Miner.
Here.
Alfredo Moreno.
Here.
Heidi Edwards. She's been excused this evening. Tia Pink.
Here.
Thank you. We do not have action resulting from executive session, so we will kick the evening off with a proclamation for National Native American Heritage Month and Indigenous Peoples Day. And could I get a thumbs up that people have what they need to do their pieces? Alfredo, you good? Perfect. Whereas each year, Americans observe National Native American Heritage Month by affirming and acknowledging the culture, heritage, innumerable contributions, and by raising awareness of the ongoing challenges faced by Native Americans. And
whereas the national observance began in 1990, and
whereas THPRD honors and values the unique and rich contributions of all community members and strives to create a welcoming and inclusive park and recreation system that is accessible and welcoming to everyone. And
the THPRD community is strengthened and made better by the many significant contributions of Native and Indigenous tribes and communities that have long made these lands their home. And
whereas Indigenous people have handed down oral histories, science, governance, a distinct relationship with nature, and continue to contribute to the cultural, educational, and spiritual fabric of our community. And
whereas THPRD recognizes that the district rests on Native lands and was originally home to the Tualatin Kalapuya affiliated with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. And
whereas we honor the rich diversity of the people we serve and have much work to do to develop active partnerships with the Native American community today. And
whereas THPRD wishes to recognize the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples Day and affirms our commitment to stand with Indigenous people against systemic racism.
Now, therefore, the Board of Directors of the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District does hereby declare the month of November 2022 as National Native American Heritage Month and the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day, and do urge all those in the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District to support and promote this observance. Thank you so much to the staff who wrote that beautiful proclamation. Next up, we have a presentation from the Washington County Department of Housing Services.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Devon from the Department of Housing Services. I'm the network administrator for the programming. Is the PowerPoint already on your side, or do I need to? Perfect. All right. Great. Perfect. First slide. All right, so let's jump on to the next one. I'm trying to, I'm going to breeze through some of the slides rather quickly, but you guys have copies of them because this is kind of a clip notes version because I only have 5 to 7 minutes, but I'll give a quick measure overview, give some program updates, and then I'll hopefully allow some time for some questions. And I talk really fast, so please flag me or slow me down at any time because I'm trying to squeeze a lot, like a year and a half worth of work into like 4 minutes. Next slide, please. So as you know, the voters approved the measure in 2020 with a larger goal to house 2,000 households throughout the Tri-County area. Washington County received 33% of that funding, which is a nice large chunk of funding. And we are using it to create a rehousing, a large rehousing system in Washington County, a very robust system. And all of this work started right in July of 2021. So it is still, I would say, in its infancy with the large number of growth. Slide, please. So our first year essentially was building a system of care. I will talk a little bit more, but we went from a budget of $5 to $50 million. So that is a large expansion in services, which needs a very large provider network. Washington County had a very small provider network, 2 to 3 providers. Now we have a provider network of 22. So there was a lot of work in building this larger network. A very large network also comes slew of technical assistance and training, getting our nonprofit and community-based partners ready to go. And then we had to really, well, we didn't have to, we really decided to focus on equitable utilization of our resources, and that is culturally specific providers, as well as knocking down any previous barriers the system might have had that provided inequitable results in their housing outcomes. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go too into this, but we have a slew of success stories that are scattered in through our slides. And it is just to really say that the people that get into our shelters more often than not are ending up in housing. And that is not only single adults, but that is families with minor children, that is older adults. I'd say right now 26% of our housing placements are over the age of 55. So we're seeing a large influx in older adults falling into homelessness. So we have to put a large priority on that, as well as transitional age youth. You know, lots of stories of success through these services that we're providing. Next slide, please. Our year one outcomes. So we launched what we call a housing case management services program. This is a program that has a 20 household to one case manager ratio, where each participant gets an ARLA voucher. It is essentially like a Section 8 voucher, a subsidized housing voucher that lasts for as long as they need it. They will only pay 28.5% of their income towards the rent. So if you have no income, that is a very low rent. If you have a higher income, the rent increases with your income. But it stays at 28.5%. And in our first year, we placed 105 households into housing. So significantly more persons than 305, but 305 households. Our original goal was 500 going into this, but we did not take into account that there was going to be 25 nonprofit providers all trying to hire up a lot of case managers at exactly the same time, and that just caused some lagging in the system essentially to get everybody staffed up and get traction. But we have traction now, and we're moving rather quickly. Next slide, please. In year two, we're focusing on some additional housing programs. One is a rapid rehousing program. This is what we call medium-term housing. So the first program we launched first year is long-term. So it's people that are going to need those supports indefinitely. This year, we're focusing also on building out medium-term, which means the assistance lasts anywhere from 3 to 24 months. So this is more focusing on families, transitional age youth, or individuals that have the ability to increase their income through employment and education, other resources over time. So it's more of a hand up type of a program. We are also launching our landlord liaison program. We're actively trying to partner with landlords in the communities, offering them incentives and benefits to work with us, and making it a pretty much the best deal in town. And currently we have, this says 400 households, but I checked this morning and it's actually 472. So we have 472 households currently on the streets holding a voucher, looking for housing with their case manager. And so then they have all the resources they need when they find a unit, whether that's security deposit, furniture, application fees, you name it, all of the things they need to get into an apartment are at their disposal. And so our goal this year is to serve and house 900 households, not counting the 305 that we got into housing last year. Next slide, please. So if you can see right here, it just shows the upward trajectory in placements and growth starting from last year, where the number was 42. So we went from 42 to 305 to this year we're shooting for 900, and we're going to keep barreling forward until we hit our ceiling, and then we'll have to get a little bit creative and figure out other ways to continue to enroll and house new people. But we're going to keep shooting that trajectory up as long as we can get away with it, as long as the money's available and sustainable for the 10 years of this funding. Next slide, please. Within our shelter network, our first year goal was to get 100 new year-round shelter beds. We exceeded that by 2, which is still overshooting the mark. But also last year we did have 225 shelter beds through the winter shelter season, which is a huge increase in Washington County. We had winter shelter beds for families, for minors, for adults, for medically fragile adults, motels, congregate settings, you name it. We had all kinds of different shelters. The different flavors of people need different flavors of shelter, need different flavors of housing, and we're trying to mix it all up and provide all of those. This year, We're adding 40 bridge shelter beds in the city of Tigard, 30 pod village pods in Hillsborough, 150 winter shelter beds dispersed throughout the county, and we're also launching a $7.5 million capital fund to help for the infrastructure necessary to build new shelters throughout Washington County. So sometimes you can find land, you just need a little help getting the building moving and put together, and so that capital fund is there just for that purpose. Next slide, please. These are our current shelter locations. Hopefully this map will continue to grow and expand, and there will be more dots north, more dots south, more dots east, more dots west, and a couple more dots in the middle as we continue to build out our shelter network. As you can see, we are just in our infancy stage of year 2. So this map did not exist a year ago. So these are all brand spanking new, and I'm assuming that you'll have double the amount of shelter dots this time next year when hopefully I will be back to do this updated presentation. Next slide, please. Here's our same graph that we did with housing for our shelters. So as you can see, year 1, it was predominantly winter shelter beds and our 100 permanent beds. Year 2, we added, there's the bridge shelter beds. Oh no, last year is the second one, where we added bridge shelter, winter shelter, and year-round shelter. Bridge shelter essentially is motel conversion. So that's when it's not a bed, it's like a unit. And that's really helpful for medically fragile adults and families with minor children to have their own personal space, as well as some people with some other behavioral health struggles that don't, they struggle with being around lots of other people, and those, other type of shelter environments are beneficial for them. This year, we're also adding the alternative shelter, and that was the pods that we referenced earlier. And so hopefully we'll also be adding some additional alternative shelter over the course of this year and next year. So like I said, a different flavor of shelter for the different flavors of people we serve. Next slide, please. This year, we took over outreach. So, there wasn't an outreach network in Washington County. And then last year, the CARES Act gave emergency solutions grants to different communities, and our community received a small grant from the federal government, and they started outreach, but it was one-time funding, meaning it was good for 18 months, and then adios, goodbye funding. So we slid in right when that funding was to expire, and we took over the initial outreach network, and then we expanded it. We added 2 more teams. We also brought in ERCO to do culturally specific services throughout Washington County. And then we have Greater Good Northwest. We also added to the network. Just Compassion is covering outreach in your region. And so all those outreach teams last year were one person. They were not very funded very well. It was, like I said, it was a one-time grant through the federal government. And so now all of our teams are 2-person teams, and it's very well coordinated, and we're working together on a centralized way to access outreach and disperse so that we're not stepping on each other's toes and we're not reinventing the wheel. Next slide, please. Other pilots we're in the process of launching or have been launched. Our housing liaison pilot, which is pretty darn cool. We're locating housing professionals at behavioral health centers, the DAB Center, Developmental Disability Center, the Hawthorne Walk-In Center. We're about to start another one with the probation department, another one with the Justice Department, so that folks that are releasing institutional care that don't have a place to stay are getting connected to housing resources before they're released. And that's been a really awesome pilot. We are underway with our lived experience workforce pilot. And what that essentially means is that folks that have experienced houselessness, got into housing, and have a desire in their heart to give back, and they want to work in the system, this is their opportunity. We are going to train them up, and then we're going to give them a paid internship for 6 months. And at the completion of that paid internship, they can be offered an employment at either the organization they interned with or another organization throughout the continuum. So we're building lots of jobs, and we need people to fill these jobs. And we have a lot of people that are getting into housing that really want these jobs. So why not? We're also partnering a lot with these new affordable housing bonds that are going out and trying to set aside units for permanent supportive housing by providing additional resources to these buildings, additional case management, additional supportive services, resident services and the such, so that if higher needs household are moving in, they have the support they need in those units. And Aloha Inn, Viewfinder, a couple really good examples of that. And then underway, we are having some staff that are trying to put together a robust volunteer network so that people, when they move into their home, can get a welcome home kit, because it's only an apartment until you make it a home, and we want to make sure that people don't want to leave their new house. And a welcome home kit from somebody in the community is a really great way to, transition that apartment to a home for somebody. Next slide, please. This is just a quick snapshot. As I said in the beginning, we had about 2 or 3 providers in Washington County doing the work. Now we have, it shows 21 right here. We actually just bumped it up to 22 because we brought in NARA, the Native American Rehabilitation Association, as our 22nd provider and our 6th culturally specific provider. And so they're all increasing their capacity at a rapid rate, which for them means, finance departments, HR specialists, and all the things you need when you go from a staff of 1 to 10 to 15. So everybody's working as fast as they can to build out the infrastructure to keep up with all this work across the system. Next slide, please. We're also doing equity analysis. I'm not going to spend too much time reading into the slide, but I can say that in our first year snapshot, we took a look at assessments versus enrollments versus placements, and we are showing, it's really kind of cool. Our enrollments look like our community. Our placements look like our community, and our success looks like our community. And I mean that within like the Latina, the migrant farm work community, the African American community, the refugee community. If you look at the stats, it's really looking equivalent across the board, which is great because we had an assessment in the beginning that didn't give equitable outcomes, and we had to smash it and write a whole new assessment, which is a really cool thing that had said we should do this. We're giving you no direction, and we just took the lead and redid the whole thing, and it was a lot of community feedback, and it's given us the results we want. So next year we'll be focusing on Real D as well, which is 42 different, it's basically getting race and ethnicity and expanding it out to 42 different categories instead of the 4 that HUD decided everybody needs to go into, that nobody likes to get funneled into, because who wants to get funneled into one of 4 boxes? So we're using this Oregon Real D, which really is expanding. We'll get to really see who we're serving really nitty gritty, which is great because then we can focus and tailor our services to the community we're working with. Next slide, please. Revenue, the dollar. So as you see, last year our actuals were $20 million. This year our budgeted is $50 million, and it goes through the spectrum of shelter services, housing support, rental assistance, the capacity building that our organizations need to do this work, which could be, like I said, capacity for their finance department to be able to invoice properly because they've never, done that before. So lots of different levels of capacity building going on through the system, as well as a regional investment fund, so that, if people stop making money because of some unforeseen circumstance, we have enough money in the bank to make sure that these programs don't fall apart next year. We need to make sure we have a healthy reserve to keep the people we're getting into housing and not have to let any of these new staff go. Next slide. And final snapshot of outcomes. So the outcome total for total for all of our placements would be 805 of population A, which is, the households that have been homeless or in a crisis for a year or longer, have a disability. More challenging households, or households with more barriers would probably be the more appropriate way to put that. And then our rapid rehousing and rapid resolution programming, which will be coming out this year. So rapid rehousing, as I said earlier, 3 to 24 months. Rapid resolution, which will hopefully be launching in the next few months, is that one-time assistance. And that's really for households that, if it wasn't for that security deposit, if it wasn't for that first month's rent, if it wasn't for that 2 months worth of rental arrears, they'd be fine. And why are we gonna do all the hubbub of bringing them in the system and giving them a case manager and this, if all we really need to do is cut one check to one property owner somewhere and the problem is solved? So that's the next program we'll be launching in the next few months. So high, medium, and low level programming. So a flavor for all the different flavors. We also, serve 110 people through our outreach programs. We'll have an additional 100 units of PSH capacity, and then we'll have an additional 175 units of permanent shelter capacity as we barrel towards our 250 goal. And I believe that is it. I think I squeezed it in about 5 minutes. Talked real fast. Any questions? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Alex, so much. Your enthusiasm is appreciated and contagious. This is an issue that our organization and the board of directors cares very deeply about. We've worked really hard to deeply understand affordable housing and our role in the crisis. It sounds like I royally messed up and Doug didn't get to do kind of the grounding, which would have been helpful, and I apologize. But Doug, are there things you want to make sure we mention before we get into questions?
Well, only a couple of things. Alex, I had a phenomenal intro for you. The problem was it was entirely under mute. So given that, but we wanted to invite in this presentation and Alex, because it really speaks to that broader perspective of some of the work we're doing, some of the conversations we've been having about surplus property in the future, to really see the live program on the grounds. Really impressive.
Thank you. It's great to watch.
Yeah, it's great work. And just in full disclosure, I serve on the Supportive Housing Services Bond Oversight Committee with my work hat. So I've been getting to watch this work firsthand. And I'm so impressed with the county and all the leadership and the amazing work of our culturally specific organizations. Questions? Peers? I don't know who popped up first, but Barbie.
Sure. Well, first, I will just also echo what Felicita has shared. Alex, your enthusiasm and the fact that you could not take a breath through all of that is rather impressive. So thank you for joining us tonight. This was so impactful to see how quickly you all have been able to just hit the ground and get running. I mean, it's not easy to take something from 20 million to 50 million, and I'm sure that comes with its own challenges. One of which I'm just curious about, and you mentioned, hey, this kind of hit at all the same time when everyone was running out to get case managers and whatnot. And we all know that, sourcing talent, retaining talent, et cetera, is an issue that all of us are facing. I'm curious how that has impacted your work and what your organization is seeing in terms of getting the right staff in place and being able to really actualize these lofty goals that you've shared with us tonight.
I've had lived experience, so I'll air my laundry out right in the beginning. So like I come from the system. I've been in the system for a while, and I can say that the best people that do the work are the people that went through it. And so due to that, we are not like when we wrote these programs, we gave really high staffing allocations to the providers, and we said we wanted you to hire people at a living wage. We wanted you to give fair, good staffing. We should not be serving the people working in the system. They should be making, they should be in the middle class community. They should be able to afford to live in the community that they're serving. So that helps. The second thing is you don't need to have a bachelor's degree. You don't have to have an associate's degree. You just need to have a passion and a heart to do this work. And if your heart's in the right place, we will train you. We have a boot camp that's next week. It's 5 days. It's 40 hours. We're going to spend 40 hours with a slew of brand new case managers, teaching them all of the things they need to do to start their job. And like, we are trying our best. We're launching a training academy. It's an online training academy. We've already got 20 classes on there. We're putting a document library together. We are trying to build out all the resources we can to give anybody that wants to do this work, their heart's in the right place, and they want to give back, and we want to make sure we can give them the tools to do the job. And going at it with that mentality versus the you need an MS this and an LC that and the do has really helped with organization staffing. When it comes down to it, it's just how fast can they hire internally, because everybody's got to have their own internal struggles as well. An organization's went from an executive director and one volunteer to 6 or 7 case managers and a $500,000 budget. Like, that's just like boom, that's like huge growth. And so like a lot of the times it's just these providers trying their very best to keep up with this level of growth. But I think we're trying to provide the tools and the resources to help them do that. Hopefully that answered the question. I said a lot more, but
no, that's incredible. Thank you for that. I think in addition, perhaps could you just share, I know a lot of this that we saw as well kind of quantities in terms of households served and number of beds and things of that sort. Could you also, I think it was on one of the original slides that you shared as well, just maybe speak to a little bit of some of the other wraparound services that are considered and provided and how that is shaping up?
So what we did, so Medicare has lots of bells and whistles, and so what we're trying to do is wrap around existing resources, so we're not using our rehousing dollars on some of these behavioral health wraparound services that are needed. And so one of the things we did was we created a partnership with Health and Human Services where we have a staff person that essentially sits in both departments, and their job is to integrate. And so they sit with their feet in both worlds, and the resources kind of fly between this person left and right. Essentially, another aspect of what we did is, it's kind of hard to explain, but there was this huge assessment that you needed to do to get in the system. It was like 100 and something odd questions. It took 90 minutes. It was like not trauma informed in any way. And we broke this huge assessment into 4 very small assessments that you do at the appropriate time and interval in your journey to housing. And so the first one just gets you in the door. The second one helps you with your barriers to getting your own apartment. The third one is an assessment that helps you get connected to the ancillary resources. And that could be Social Security disability through SOAR. That could be behavioral health resources. That could be connected you to a church, a 12-step program, a mosque. I mean, you like whatever your needs are, could be getting you connected to this workforce development pilot. So we've done the first leg of this, which is trying to create all the housing interventions. Over the course of the next year, I would say from January on, a lot of my attention is going to be focused on connecting these other ancillary resources into the system so that once you're in housing, you don't have a reason to leave.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alex.
Yeah, of course.
Tia, did you have a question or did it get answered?
Oh, okay. Oh, no, it got answered. Thank you so much, Alex, for the presentation. It was great. And I was able to keep up, so I'm pretty proud of myself today.
Yes. Well, thank you, Alex, for this presentation. You know, like I shared, this is something that we see within the scope of our work. We are serving the same folks. When there are folks who don't have access to housing, sometimes they utilize our parks. We have safe overnight parking locations, or safe. There's a name for it. I'm forgetting. I apologize. But thank you, Alex, for the presentation. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thanks for bringing your whole self to your work. And we look forward to an update in a year, and just continuing to stay engaged.
Thank you. And like I said, if you ever want us to come again, me or any of the team, don't hesitate to reach out. We're more than willing to come and do the dance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a great night.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Next on the agenda is our public hearing, which has a very formal process that I am going to read through so that so we don't have to do it next month. Let's see. Okay. I will now open the public hearing to conduct the second reading of ordinance 2022-01 for the purpose of amending district compiled policies, Chapter 7, District Regulations. And I think we're going to hear from Mark Pierce.
Yeah, I'm sure that everyone's been able to review the comments that were the result of the conversation we had last month. And so I am happy to answer any questions that anyone may have on those.
It doesn't appear that there are questions, but thank you, Mark, for being here just in case.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We did not receive public comment, so I will now close the public hearing and looking for board action.
I will make a motion that I move that the Board of Directors approve the second reading of Ordinance 2022-01 by title only.
This is Barbie. I'm happy to second.
Alfredo Moreno.
I'm a yes.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Tia Ping,
Yes.
Felisa Monteblanco.
Yes, thank you. So let's see. After a second reading is received and the vote is, oh, this is directions. I don't need to read that out loud. Okay. The ordinance number 2022-01 of the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District, Oregon, an ordinance amending district compiled policies, chapter 7, to update district general regulations. I read the title. I'm
I will
looking for a new motion.
I will make the second motion. I move that the Board of Directors adopt ordinance 2022-01, amending district compiled policies, chapter 7, district regulations.
This is Barbie. I'll second again.
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Tia Ping,
Yes.
Felisa Monteblanco.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you to staff for making all the updates and changes that we provided last time.
And let's do this one more time. Let's see. So I will now open the public hearing to conduct the second reading of ordinance 2022-02 for the purpose of amending district compiled policies, chapter 8, district property. And I think we'll be hearing from Julie Rocha.
Yes, thank you. So we have no additional changes or edits from the first reading on district compiled policy 8.
Any questions for Julie? And we've received no public comment, so I will now close the public hearing. And looking for a board action.
Yes, this is Alfredo, and I move that the Board of Directors approve the second reading of ordinance 2022-02 by title only.
I will second that.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Tia Ping,
Yes.
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Felisa Monteblanco.
Yes. I will now read the title into the record. Ordinance number 2022-02 of the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District, Oregon, an ordinance amending district compiled policies, chapter 8, to update district property regulations. I'm looking for an additional motion.
This is Alfredo again. I move that the Board of Directors adopt ordinance 2022-02, amending district compiled policies, chapter 8, district property.
This is Tia. I will second.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Tia Ping,
Yes.
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Felisa Monteblanco.
Yes. Thank you. That was almost painless. Appreciate Jessica for making sure that that was pretty clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very clear. Thank you, Jessica. Okay, so we are moving on to agenda item number 9, audience time, but we have not received any requests for public testimony. So we will go into agenda item number 10, board time. Would anyone like to share what they've been working on, meetings they've been having? Barbie, go ahead.
All right, got a few things to share, so bear with me. I will try to be concise, but would love to share with you all. Thanks to the work of our staff as well as the collective staff with the Bend Parks and Rec. A few of us from the THPRD staff, along with Mayor Beatty and city councilors, had an informational tour last weekend and aligned with our friends over at the Bend Park and Rec, and was just really an informative weekend to see how things play out there and garner new ideas and share best practices, et cetera. So thank you to all of the staff. I know that was a lot to organize, all of the elected folks and staff to take the time personally to head over to Bend, but was super impactful. So just wanted to share that update. In addition, I had the honor and the privilege of hosting some elected leaders at my home last week. With Congresswoman Bonamici, and lots of wonderful information and connection with folks from county commissioners to the Beaverton School Board. But really interesting to hear when and how we can best engage with the Congresswoman, and in particular, of course, how can we better engage and or leverage for future funding, and an opportunity there with the congressionally directed spending. So just was a flag of how quickly that process moves. And so wanted to just flag that with us as a board and for staff to say, you know, the turnaround time on something like that sounds like it's 2 to 3 weeks in the making, but we can have our ducks in a row in advance. And so just raising here that I know we've got such an active and engaged board, and we're doing everything we can to explore other opportunities for grant dollars and funding, et cetera. So the partnership there and not missing that opportunity, I think, is a big one. I think last and certainly not least, but I would just like to give a quick update from programs and events. We met last month, and so a few highlights of that. Of course, we got some information, some updates on Welcoming Week, which to date this year, we've had over 1,000 folks participate in activities through Welcoming Week. So that program continues to just thrive and expand in ways that I think are super impactful for our community. Also reviewing the RISE volunteer program and looking at the success from this past summer and ways in which we can continue to grow and expand that program, and especially how that involves our youth participation. So shout out to the RISE volunteers and keeping that program going and looking to see that expand beyond what we've seen thus far. And then last but not least, taking a look at a draft of the welcoming packet and something that we're looking to move forward. And I think I saw on here that Holly's here and can maybe speak into this more, but just having our programs and events folks take a look at that before we move final. So again, what all would be contained and have that input from our community and our activity members. So those are my updates.
Thank you, Barbie. Tia?
Okay. I was also one of the lucky ones that got to go with Barbie. She was our fearless driver. I'm still here. Thank you, Barbie, for getting us safely there and back. But it was lovely to meet the other board members from Ben Parks and Rec, and it was great to also have the chance to meet a lot of the new counselors for the Beaverton City Council, because they were able to come on the trip with us. So it was a good relationship building between the two, and I think it'll really further our relationships with intergovernmental work stuff. As far as Ben, parks are beautiful. Everything is beautiful over there. I had like a quick second where I'm like, oh, I should move here just for their Parks and Rec. So it shows how powerful Parks and Recs can be as far as quality of life and everything. And they do things greatly. We do things greatly, but there's lots of things that we do differently. And there's things that they've done that we've taken inspiration from, I know, as a board and as staff, that we hope to bring here, and that just makes us all better in utilizing everybody's strength and trying to figure out how we all do that so we can bring it and make it available for everyone. I also started my kickoffs for meeting different intergovernmental electeds to help champion our hopeful Cooper Mountain project, nature project. So I got to meet with Edward Kimmy today, or not today, but this month. And he is also newly elected onto the Beaverton City Council. And we were able to talk a lot about Cooper Mountain and all the things that we do at THPRD and things that Beaverton City Council, or the city of Beaverton and THPRD can do. So again, strengthening all of those relationships. As far as nature and trails, there was a meeting. It had some great news. They're working on a climate change package, which is wonderful, and doing all the steps and all the major projects that we're going to be, THPRD itself is going to focus to champion climate change work. There was some sad news. There's this new beetle. I have the name. It's like emerald ash borer, and it's a beetle that actually is I think it, if I remember correctly, came from Asia or somewhere, but it has now arrived to Oregon, and it destroys ash trees. And of course, we have native ash here and a ton of it, and apparently we haven't found a way to manage them at all. So that may be in the timeline of something that we need to kind of keep watch of and hopefully figure out how to try to manage. But it was kind of really sad, but it speaks to the importance of really managing non-domestic animals and insects and stuff like that, and like how detrimental they can be to our environment. But so that we may be hearing more stuff in the future on how to remediate them, or even if we can, but that was just one of the kind of downers from that meeting. The other thing, though, is advisory committee is still recruiting. I believe it's October 24th. So if anybody who's listening, the Natures and Trails is recruiting along with budget and I'm sure other advisory committees. So there's something for everyone if somebody wants to get involved. Just go ahead and go online and then you can apply. And I'm sure we always get great candidates and we're so appreciative of all the helps of our volunteers.
Thank you, Tia. Alfredo?
All right, I've got a handful of things here. First of all, the Parks and Facilities Advisory Committee, just really wanted to give them a shout out for their hard work on just brainstorming and kind of developing a proposal for our challenge grant. Nisha George, Carl Nelson, and THPRD's Keith Watson in particular really leading that work and just identifying some very pragmatic needs and ways in which we can bolster the accessibility at Greenway Park. And I was just impressed that it can be very easy to get hyper complicated and go looking for something that has a lot of panache, but to identify just a fundamental thing that we can do at some point and would benefit and improve the lives of our users in a very real ways was great. So cheers to them. Had coffee with Eileen Kravitz, the executive director of the Tualatin Hills Park Foundation, and Eileen's had some personal obstacles and things in her life, and wanted to give our support to her, but had a great conversation just about basically how the foundation can kind of deepen its work, how they would like to do that. For me, I think it's just the foundation and the district obviously are just critical symbiotic partners. I think there's great stories of the real life impact that our staff are having on the community with the help of the funding that the foundation is able to provide for programs. And I hope that they continue to amplify those stories in our community and let more people know who we're working with and what kind of impact we're all making. Really looking forward to kind of all around kind of deepening that work and district and foundation working very well together in the years to come. So, and then finally, I wanted to give, I learned earlier this week of the unexpected passing of Frank Angelo, who Frank seemed to play a role in pretty much every organization in Greater Beaverton. And THPRD was no different. He was on the foundation board of trustees, budget advisory committee. Bond advisory committee. I think the budget advisory committee as well. Worked as a consultant and just countless ways. Frank passed away unexpectedly, and I will say he was exceedingly generous with his knowledge, time, and warmth for all who crossed paths with him. As I try to get through this again, but I think for those of us who give our time to organizations freely and give ourselves, it's just when you cross paths with somebody like that who does it with such joy and passion and free will, it's very inspiring. Those of us who knew Frank are the better for it, and so I just want to recognize him before I part completely. So, cheers, Frank.
Thank you, Alfredo. I didn't know that. I wish there were more Franks And I wish there were more Alfredos. So thank you. Appreciate oh, and thank you, Aisha. So my updates real fast. Doug and I and Jessica and facilitator Thomas and I are working on the retreat. New element this year, there will be skill building / team building. Yay. Get excited. We'll send you that agenda soon. Also, Doug and I had a meeting with the new Barnes Elementary principal, which was great. He's really looking to see if there are opportunities for more after school care. Of course, I was super excited, but we need to be mindful of capacity and revenue and all those things. So he has a few assignments. He's going to kind of get a sense of what the need is within his school. And I think Doug has some homework too. I left with no homework, shocking. That rarely happens. But it was a good conversation, and it's always nice when a principal like proactively reaches out. I think that's a good sign. And then I forgot to talk about the amazing work happening in the district with in relation to the Native American history. Sorry, I'm gonna mess this up. Native American Heritage Month. Since I have the mic, I'm gonna say it. So district-wide activities. All THPRD facilities have posters honoring Indigenous Peoples Day and Native American Heritage Month. Youth in the Thrive program will do various arts and crafts and will read themed books during weekly story time honoring proclamation topics. Thrive is also working on a land acknowledgement. Very cool. The Rec Mobile did outreach on Indigenous Peoples Day and honored Native American heritage by doing arts and crafts and playing Indigenous games. And in terms of center-specific activities, Cedar Hills, Elsister, Garden Home, and Harmon are creating dedicated bulletin boards with information. The Nature Center is creating a new Pacific Lamprey exhibit as a part of Newt Day. I love Newt Day so much, highlighting the cultural significance of Pacific Lamprey to Native tribes and incorporating Indigenous history. The exhibit will include a hands-on activity and takeaway flyer for participants. So thanks for all the staff who are incorporating these values and this proclamation into the work very much. Any other updates from my peers? Okay, we will move on to consent agenda. Would someone like to make a motion?
Yes, this is Barbie, and I move that the board approve the consent agenda as submitted.
This is Tia. I will second.
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Tia Ping,
Yes.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Felicita Monteblanco.
Next up, we have unfinished business. First up, an update on the comprehensive plan.
Right, Aisha, and I think Peter.
That's right. We are both here to speak with you tonight. Good evening, everyone. I'm Aisha Panis, the Park Services Director for the district. And tonight I am joined by Peter Swinton, our urban planner in the planning department, to provide an update on the ongoing comprehensive plan project. And we are here to hear your feedback on the plan's draft recommendations tonight. So on the next slide, we want to bring you up to date on where we are. You've seen a slide similar to this before, but as you know, we're developing this new comp plan that seeks to operationalize the information that we have in our vision action plan and put that into goals and actions that the district's going to take over the next 20 years. So the plan is divided into 4 sections, and the first section talks about who we are. It states our district values and orients people to who we are as an organization. Next, we talk about where we are today, and that's by talking about our existing conditions within the district. The next is that we outline where we want to be by discussing our goals, objectives, and guiding principles. And then finally, the comp plan proposes a path for how we get there by laying out the policies that will influence our work moving forward and the recommendations for how the district can achieve our vision action plan, future vision for the district. So at the last meeting, when we visited you, we heard your feedback on the draft goals, objectives, and guiding principles. And since then, we have worked to incorporate your feedback into the goals, objectives, and guiding principles into that where we want to be section. So we took those updated goals, objectives, guiding principles and combed through those. We also took a look at our existing plans, our functional plans. We have 5 of them, and they talk about the how we go about doing things. So we used those documents. We also looked at the 2013 Service and Financial Sustainability Plan to look at the assessment tools that we've used and the decision-making processes that we outline there, which really talk about how we prioritize the work we do, how we allocate resources, and how we take action. So once we did that, we reflected on those tools and processes and what we would need to change in order to achieve the vision outlined in the Vision Action Plan. And we drafted our recommendations that are intended to center our vision and comp plan goals. So we have worked with our leadership staff to hone our recommendations, and we've categorized them under the comp plan's 7 goal areas. And tonight I'm excited to share with you the draft recommendations that will make up the bulk of the how we get there section. And so based on our refinement process with staff, and this has happened since the packet was sent out, so what you see on the screen tonight may not exactly match what was in the packet. Some of the wording's been changed, some of the recommendations have changed a little bit, and we want to share that most up-to-date information. So that's what you'll see in the slideshow tonight. And then we're looking again for your feedback on how these recommendations work for you. So we are going to together walk you through each one of these recommendations. And on the next slide, Peter will kick that process off.
Thanks, Aisha. Hi, everybody. Good to be with you this evening. So the following draft recommendations are categorized according to the comp plan's 7 goals, which are listed for you here. As you consider these draft recommendations, we ask that you keep in mind 2 questions. Should any of the recommendations be consolidated or removed? And what recommendations integral to realizing the district's vision and comp plan goals are missing? So with that, we will jump right in. Next slide, please. So these 3 recommendations have been categorized under the welcoming and inclusion goal, an inclusive goal, as they're externally facing activities that seek to make the district more responsive and representative to our patrons. Briefly, they are to align our community engagement with evolving methods and best practices, to update the district website and registration systems, and to continue efforts to reflect our community in staffing and programming. Next slide.
All right, I love that we're already getting a thumbs up. That's exciting. All right, on this next slide, you see the Play for Everyone recommendations. And these are recommendations that seek to improve the access to physical amenities and programs and to ensure that our offerings are responsive to the evolving needs of our patrons. So these recommendations reflect some feedback we heard from you last time, that ensuring our level of service model is truly measuring the things that matter to us when we're talking about how well our community is served with park and recreation services. So that was something we had heard from you last time. We also have a recommendation here to update our program's functional plan. And this is important because we have certain determinants that tell us how well the services are meeting the needs of the community. And we also have that service assessment model that really forces us to take a broad look at what's offered in the community and really make some critical decisions about what are we best positioned to offer, what are we better in partnering with someone else on, or what should we maybe leave to others to do because they're able to do that work better. So updating the program's functional plan will ensure that we're very up to date on knowledge of all of the other offerings within the community and where we land in those. And then finally, it's a recommendation that has us looking at the trends to really make sure that we are offering programs that are meeting the evolving needs of the community. So Peter has the next slide for you.
Thanks. Yeah. So these recommendations with the accessible and safe, the 3 you see here, they're really focused on ensuring that our recreation sites continue to be accessible to our community and that they're planned, designed, and built and maintained in such a way that makes our patrons feel comfortable and safe during each visit. So some things that we'd like to do are review and update our functional plans periodically so that we know we're keeping up all of our different properties and programs. Everything that we do, we want to make sure that they're maintained at a really high standard and responsive to our community's evolving needs. Then we also want to look at developing a facilities functional plan, and that's sort of in line with that previous one. We have an athletic facilities functional plan, but the facilities functional plan would really study what our community needs out of our facilities and what they're looking for in the future so that we can cater to that. Then finally, ensure that park amenities are maintained and meet the needs of the communities that they serve. So, you know, we've got a ton of neighborhood parks out there. We want to make sure that all of the amenities within those parks are top notch and that they, as we need to be replacing things, that we're replacing them with things that our community's members want to see. So I shall hand it over to you for the next slide.
Thank you. So I have environmental stewardship, and we wanted to point out that this was a kind of a slightly changed goal area. It had been in the Vision Action Plan, but it was more about protecting natural spaces. And so based on your feedback, we wanted to match this more closely to our own district value. And so these are recommendations that are intended to deepen our commitment to climate leadership and our efforts to protect and conserve our native wildlife and high functioning ecosystems. So the recommendations in this category are to align our land management policies with our district values, to protect those high functioning natural areas and habitats at our recreation sites, and to implement a climate action plan. And you'll note that there's a little bit more to that recommendation 12 than just the climate action plan. The conversation that we've had internally is really that the climate action plan focuses on efforts we can undertake as an organization to reduce our carbon footprint. But there are a lot of other climate resiliency measures that we want to incorporate and want to make a part of our process as well. So that kind of, that was an add-on to that particular recommendation. So next slide, please.
Yeah, here we've got the diversity, equity, inclusion, and access goal. And these recommendations capture the internal work that THPRD is and must do to further prioritize equity in district operations and decision making. So you notice with that first goal, welcome and inclusive, that's more the externally focused work, whereas the DEIA goal is more that internally focused work. So some things we'd like to do here are ensure equity is prioritized within all district processes and decisions by incorporating an equity lens, and then continue to invest in DEI training for our staff. Next slide, please.
So in technology and innovation, the two recommendations that are categorized under this goal strive to improve our service delivery and our organizational efficiency by developing the infrastructure, the undergirding of all of the work we need to do to innovate our district offerings based on both qualitative and quantitative data. So these recommendations are really about building up that that framework that we can use. And so we've made some steps in that direction. I've talked to you about the park resource analyst position. Our new hire will begin next week, and we're very excited about the ability to know and understand what our investments to date have been in the district, and then we can look at those areas with lesser level of service and come up with some innovative strategies for how we move the needle in those areas. And that's all based on actions that are in the Vision Action Plan and that have carried forward into our comprehensive plan. So the next slide is Peter's.
Yeah, and so this is a two-parter, but it's the last goal area, so financial sustainability. And the recommendations you see here, they're intended to help the district position itself to fund the work that we've outlined within the comp plan, enabling us to achieve the goals of the Vision Action Plan and the comp plan. So, you know, if we don't fund and allocate resources appropriately, then the work doesn't get done. So we wanted to make sure there was a focus on that. So what you see here are looking at better integrating grants into our long-term funding strategies, ensuring that funding is available for future strategic planning, and aligning our performance measures with our district values. And I'll let Aisha close us out. Next slide, please.
Yes, so these are the final two recommendations within the financial sustainability goal. And along with those previous three recommendations under the goal, they seek to ensure that we have the resources necessary to continue realizing the mission and vision long term. So these ones are to review revenue streams and plan for the future, look at our operating model and make improvements to that, and then also to update our resource allocation model. And so if you're familiar with the pyramid, that has been the tool we've used to determine how things are charged for within our district. At the bottom, the base of the pyramid are those things that we deem are community benefit, primarily community benefit, and we don't have an expectation of realizing any revenue from those activities. That's maintaining parks and trails, for example. And then as you go up the pyramid to the tier 5, right at the top, that's an acknowledgement that the benefit is mostly to an individual. And so those are things that have a higher expectation for cost recovery. And so that was last updated or created in 2013. And it's now time to think about how we consider things differently. We now have values to guide us. We have your support as a board setting the course for us. And so we know that things have changed. And we believe that that is a critical element that we need to look to as we move through the comp plan process into the strategic planning process. So next slide, please.
So now that you've seen all 21 draft recommendations, we're eager to hear your feedback on the 2 questions from earlier. So your feedback is going to help us finalize these plan recommendations and also get ready for the district's next strategic plan. So again, those 2 questions are, should any of these draft recommendations be consolidated or removed? And what recommendations integral to realizing the district's vision and comp plan goals are missing? So I will open the floor. Any questions or reflections on those, on the questions on the slide? We would love to hear it.
Aisha, y'all are speaking my love language. I heard updated registration. I heard change to the pyramid. I am excited. I have a couple thoughts, but I want to make sure other folks chime in. Barbie, go ahead.
Sure, just a question. And I don't know if this means this is a Barbie I have not read to understand where this might be. So in the question of like, is this missing? You point me to the direction if this is contained, but I know that Julie and others, and including our board, have really leaned into and educating ourselves on the disability side of things for our patrons who are experiencing disability. And I'm wondering, from looking ahead, if that's incorporated under our accessible and safe, and it contained, I think even just taking, I think it's, our numbering system is now off, but there was one that was flagged about develop a park amenities standards analysis. And if in that standard analysis, that would be comprehensive of considering those folks experiencing disability, or if that might show up under the DEIA section. But would just love to kind of speak into that to see if there's a way in which that perhaps is something that's missing that does tie back to our district's vision.
Yes, I will start and see if Peter has anything to add. I think that there are some elements that you're going to see in multiple places. So welcoming and inclusive would be one thing, and how we interact with people at our front desk and how we get people in the door. And I think breaking down barriers so that they can get in the front door safely is sort of a piece that we'll be looking at from the built environment side. So right now we allocate funding in every budget to take care of deficiencies that are identified in our ADA transition plan. And so we would continue to do that. And I think that that's kind of one area. Within the DEIA goal area, we also have the applying the equity lens. And one element of identity or groupness is being a part of the disability community. And so there's work that we need to do internally as staff, and that's what that goal gets to be able to best provide and reach out to these communities. So we would see it there as well. And accessible and safe is also a physical environment thing where we would be looking at those breaking down of barriers, incorporating more universal design. So even beyond ADA compliance, looking at universal design to make sure that not just folks who experience a disability, but also those who push strollers and drag wagons behind them are able to access our site. So, I mean, we're looking at ways to incorporate that into those parks, trails, natural areas, and access points.
Amazing. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and just to add on to that briefly, a lot of that work is captured in the goals, objectives, and guiding principles. There are a number of actions that came directly out of our vision action plan that speak to a lot of the work that Aisha is talking about. And so as we look to take these recommendations, which are sort of purposefully broad and expansive in their scope, and look at something through a strategic plan or a functional plan lens, those things would start to we would look to break out into more sort of discrete projects addressing those specific vision action plan goals, and making progress in those more targeted areas.
Tierra Alfredo, any questions?
No questions. It's great. I mean, there's things I'm like, well, maybe they can group it together, but I mean, it all says the same thing that I wanted to say, so it's perfect.
And your team updating registration, right?
Of course, that's like it's like number one right there. It's right at the top. But I was like, should that go in technology and innovation, and then is welcoming and inclusive part of DEIA? So, no, I mean I think whether we move things here and there, like it was previously said, like when we're talking about, you know, our community and equity and all the different groups, it's multifaceted. It falls in in all the buckets all at one time. So this, I think, is a really good job of covering whether it's in one bucket or another. It's been addressed. So it's great work, staff.
Thank you.
Aisha, is this predominantly an internal document?
I would not say it's an internal document. It is a roadmap for our entire community. So the THPRD community, through the Vision Action Plan, outlined what they wanted us to look like. And this is kind of the strategy plan for how we get there. So the next slide here, maybe it would be appropriate to go here now. And Peter kind of stole all these words already. So, you know, you'll hear some repeats, but he's exactly right. So where we're at right now is putting more energy and effort into defining what in the next 20 years we want to do that was in that big vision. And the next step now is to take a look at it from the strategic plan point of view, which is what do we think we have the support from you all as our board, and based on our district values and our current priorities, which can change each year, what do we think we have the support to complete within the next 3 to 5 years? So this is 21 recommendations that you're looking at tonight. These things are going to boil down into specific areas within a 3 to 5 year plan that actually says we're going to put funds behind these things. These are what we're going to try and move the needle on in the near term. And so the idea is that that plan would outline, you know, what we're doing year 1, year 2, year 3 on this particular thing, and we would move through that process. So we do anticipate that this is, you know, a clear communication of our values. You know, we've heard that phrase, like, don't tell me your values, just show me your budget and I'll tell you what your values are. We believe that. So this is a outward facing document that guides the work that we do, that hones down into the strategic plan, which says in the near term, these are what our focus areas are going to be. And that's really going to be tied to what you all talk about in a couple of weeks at the retreat.
Aisha, can I ask, is there any benefit? I mean, I know this was developed from our Vision Action Plan, which our Vision Action Task Force was amazing, but it doesn't readily call out, like, go back to call out the Vision Action Plan. Like, is there, like, I'm just thinking, like, as we plan parks and stuff, like, should we be, like, having something to refer back and like checking off like the things that we've done and what's missing that we haven't addressed, and that constant feedback of, okay, well, we've developed this type of park or this type of program. The community has asked for this, but we haven't done that yet. Like, is there some way to phrase that in that we will constantly keep looking back to see and check off the things that our community has asked of us to do?
Yes, and there is something that we talked about, and I don't know that Holly is still with us tonight to share about this, but we had talked about what that annual check-in point would be on the vision action plan. And then we talked about, well, maybe it's not on the vision action plan, maybe it's more about the comp plan and the strategic plan. Those are, these actual action items that are being outlined. And so I think that that is something that we can do. I do want to assure you that we're already operationalizing the information that we learned. This wasn't the most recent park, I don't believe, that we've planned, but when we brought out La Raíz for the first time to talk about, okay, here's the site, this is what they've got on the site, it's a beautiful grove of trees there. We definitely want to protect those, but what else can we do in this area? We went directly to the vision action plan and looked at the things that the community was saying they wanted to see. And we said, well, maybe a splash pad doesn't make the most sense in this location. Pine needles and splash pads are not going to work out really well. So we went through the menu of different things that people said they were interested in seeing and looked at the context of that site to see whether it made sense. And that was a great first filter that then informed the ultimate concept plan developed for the site. So we're doing that now and would totally anticipate doing it. We're talking about the issue of shade within our park sites, and talking about especially in parks that are being built in areas that used to be farmland that didn't have a lot of trees, no natural shade. Not the case at La Raíz, but certainly in the case in South Cooper Mountain and North Bethany. And so, looking at ways to provide that shade, either by planting the trees or by putting in some sort of shade structure. So we're incorporating all of that work now.
Great. Yeah. And I was just more thinking about like broadly for the whole thing, right? Because our vision action plan went through each of these, which is why we kind of have these pillars and stuff. And I don't know if we just need to add something about constantly checking in that we don't it's like you start to develop things, right? Like you go one level, then you go to the next level, and then but do we have a thing to feed back to the original document just in case, it doesn't all get filtered out by, you get to one end and you haven't checked in or anything like that. So that's just my random thought in the air.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tia. The only thing I'm struggling with is the number, I don't remember which number, but the equity lens piece, because part of me, I'm sitting here thinking, like, is that a series of questions? Like, what are we committing ourselves to? And I want to commit ourselves to something bold and thoughtful and hold ourselves accountable. So I don't have an answer, so that's not fair. But I'm struggling with it because we ask ourselves tougher questions than that. And I think I'd like to see that in the comp plan.
Can we go back to that slide?
Yes, it was under the DEIA goal area. There you go. So it's number 13, I think is what you're referring to.
Yeah, so I mean, and what you spoke to a few minutes ago had me think, because one of the things as you were presenting, I was thinking like, oh, it'd be nice to have an example, but under each of these, thinking about accessibility for like someone who isn't one of us who reads this stuff for fun. And I think you answered that with as the document continues to evolve, like it'll have that level of detail, which is great. But I incorporate an equity lens. Like, do we have an equity lens? And I missed that. Like, it's not strong enough language to me, considering all the work that we've been doing. And I don't have recommended language, so this isn't a critique. It's just something worthy for discussion maybe later. And I know it's almost 9 o'clock. And everyone's tired. That just struck me.
I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, I think we can spend more time. We don't have the answers either. We knew this was a big, ambitious recommendation, and that it doesn't get into the level of detail that we want to do. What we tried to talk about are the different areas that we would want to dig in on equity. And so that's a bunch of different things that you see right there. So the idea was that when we put this item into a strategic plan, we'd start talking about what this means exactly. And what it can mean is if we're looking at equity and what we want to do is define equity. What do we mean in this context? And so we anticipate that being something we can put in a glossary. And so for equity, it can mean, a variety of experiences. It can mean, serving different populations, different self-identified groups. It could mean the intersectionality of all those groups. But when you're talking about something like site acquisition, if we heard from the community, and we have heard certain things that they want, and we're monitoring trends, because that's another recommendation. And what we learn is that we really, really need a mountain bike track. Then that would inform what we would be doing in terms of site acquisition. And so we would be looking at which groups would use this. Is this an underserved area? Would it provide an opportunity to provide a resource within a level of service deficient area within our system? And so I think that that's something that we can do. With our programming, we're already going out and making relationships with community organizations and cultural organizations. And so we need to continue doing that. And I think we have not spelled out exactly what that looks like. We have more work to do in this area, but we wanted to put the energy into having this recommendation so that people understand what our values are. This is a key value for our district. It's number one up there. And so we need to spend more time on this. But I'm glad you asked the question. I'm hopeful that other folks might come up with some ideas about how they want us to approach this recommendation. But this was the start of the language, and so we're all ears.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, for me, like 14, I know exactly what that means. I know that means money and I mean time. And then when I read 13, I was like, that's squishy. And we're not squishy. We're bold here. So yeah, that's my thought process this evening. Thank you, Aisha. Tia?
I mean, I was gonna just to kind of jump off on this conversation that we're having. Aisha, when you talked about community engagement, building relationships, I think that's the important part of all of this, of really strengthening that part and calling that equity lens is not going to come from ourselves, but that we are committed to going out there and getting the partners and the people who live through these lenses, and that they will be the ones, we're committed to learning from them and having them help to lead us in the right direction. That might be more helpful. I think that was the piece that I feel like it's missing. I know we have in our welcoming that it's that we have community engagement to review all process to line policy and industry standards. But as far as I think it would be a bold statement to say that we're committed to making sure everyone is at the table, that we don't know everything, that we are going to go out there. We're going to find all these people to help advise us. We are going to build these relationships so that we are hearing from our community, we're representative of our community, we are doing everything for our community and whatever our community has asked, which is the whole point of our vision task force in the first place. So something like that, those, once you said community engagement and relationships, that really shined as far as this part for me anyways.
Well, and that's great too, because we have the other value, which is, alignment with community vision. And so I think that's a really great connection point. Thank you for noting that.
Thank you, Aisha and Peter and everyone who's worked on this document. It's really exciting to hear all the things that are going to happen and that we'll have this as a tool. And I know it takes a lot of thoughtfulness and brain capacity to do this. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I do think we have one more slide to talk to you about, just about the timeline. So Peter is going to take care of that.
Yeah, thank you for all the feedback tonight. It's really great to hear that. I think we're moving in the right direction and we have some good information on how we might be able to tweak things. But as indicated by the gold star here, the comp plan is nearing completion. So we're going to work to incorporate the feedback we heard tonight and further refine the recommendations and best practices section. But in November, we're going to hope to come back with a draft version of the comprehensive plan for your consideration. And then as the comp plan moves towards completion, it will be informing the how the strategic planning process is kicking off. And then it's also a really integral part to the CAPRA reaccreditation process. So thank you for your time this evening and hope you have a great night.
Thank you. And next up, we have some center supervisors.
Yes, Emily and Ann are here. Hopefully they're still here. There they are.
Thank you for still being here.
We are still here. This is thank you. Good evening to everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm Ann Johnson. I'm the center supervisor at Cedar Hills Recreation Center, and I'll be joined in a minute by Emily Kent. And we're going to give you a review of our summer programs from 2022. And I don't know if this is a save the best for last, but it's definitely save the celebration for last, right? Because we had a successful summer, an engaging summer, an expanded summer. And those are the things that we love, and they're good news. We're going to start on the next slide and kind of give you an overview of what we'll talk about real quick. Our recreation division has recreation programs and camps, aquatics, nature, sports, inclusion, as well as mobile programs. So, you know, we're out there seeing a ton of kids over the summer, and we're going to talk to you about each one of those programs really quick, and then Emily's going to give you some great grant news and talk about program evaluations as well. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll start off with programs and attendance. We offered over 1,300 programs this summer. 25,618 in registrations. So that's just awesome. As you see these pictures, I hope that's a part that you can really latch on to and just love, because you can see the excitement and the joy in the faces here. But from art and dance, sports and swimming, full day offerings, our programmers really collaborated together across the district to provide diverse programs and to meet community needs. And that's what we're about. On the next slide, we'll talk about recreation specific. Our recreation centers, we continued our full day camps. From 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., we served over 2,000 participants during the summer whose families needed that all day care. As you can see from the faces here, off-site field trips were back. We got to take kids and travel and have adventures that were new adventures to many of them. Several of our programs, such as Safety Town, we expanded the number of weeks. We were expanding our bilingual sessions of camps to serve a different part of our community. We were able to have guest speakers back in our camps, volunteers. We had over 150, and you've already heard about the RISE student volunteer program, over 150 high school students coming in as role models into our camps. It was that's an awesome program. And then here come our community program, our community partners, BSD bringing buses to show our Safety Town kids how to travel. Just all of our community partners that throw in and just share their knowledge of how to make things fun and exciting for the kids. You'll see on the next slide, our recreation programs, sports and nature, we all collaborate, and aquatics is a great thing to have back, right? We have the Tualatin Hills Aquatic Center, Beaverton Swim, Conestoga Recreation and Aquatic Center, all opened last spring. Somerset Swim Center, Raleigh Swim Center opened this summer. Harmon Swim Center opened just in September, and Aloha is just around the corner, opening in November. These openings of these facilities brought opportunities to hire, right? Hiring new full-time staff to work in these programs, but also to expand our part-time staff. And a very large part of that in aquatics is lifeguard training and junior guard training programs. Our programmers had some innovative ways, whether it was an advanced swimmer that wanted to come in and lifeguard, or whether it was someone that wanted to lifeguard and had no swimming experience. They developed a program that people could jump into the pool, learn to swim, and then start working toward their guard certification. And that was just another awesome program we had this summer. And of course, Splash pads. Who doesn't love a great splash pad, right? They're continue to be popular within our community and very well used. We'll go to the next slide and hit on nature programs. The Tualatin Hills Nature Center hosted over 70 school and group programs back into the center as they were reopening. 17 different schools around the area, 8 from BSD were involved. And then they took Nature Mobile and went out around the Beaverton area with free hands-on activities for kids and their families. We had 6 NEWT interns, that's nature experiences and workforce training. And they worked over 1,200 hours supporting our camps and our mobile programs. And then our park rangers came in from Nature and Trails and supported our Black Parent Union's Summer Academy with the kids. That is a quick, brief summary from recreation, aquatics, and nature in our division. And I'm going to throw it over to Emily as we go to the next slide to talk about the rest of our division.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, board, for having us tonight. My name is Emily Kent, and I'm the center supervisor at our Garden Home Recreation Center and the Elsie Stewart Center. So one of the things I'm excited to talk to you about is youth sports and youth sports camps. We had over 3,000 registrations and youth camps across the district. And something that I think people don't realize is youth sports is one of the earliest programs we can offer. It's something our youngest participants can do and really get an introductory into what we offer in not just the summers, but all programs. So having those offered, a lot of our 4 to 6 year olds take sports camps across the district, and it's the first time they come to us in the summer. Within that, the athletic center and the tennis center are really the heart of our sports programming and the good work that they do. They have gotten really innovative as well. The athletic center works with the nature center to do a nature and sports camp, and kids learning how to move and be out in nature, but also engaging in sports, which is a great collaboration. And then another thing that the sports department has done to elevate programs is kind of distinguish between what is a camp and what is a clinic. And the tennis center did a great job this summer in elevating and taking some of their more experienced instructors and really evolving clinic style for those who are looking for that really specific instruction and growth within the sport. So athletic center, tennis center, getting very creative in how they deliver their service to the community. Sports Madness camps, which are your variety of sports camps, are always our most popular because there's a lot of individuals who it's not about the sport, it's about going out and moving and having fun and learning. And so there's still lots of opportunities to do that in sports throughout the summer. So it was a fun, the weather was good. We had a lot of good weather, so that was really nice to be able to have sports outdoors, indoors, and throughout the district. Next slide, please. Mobile recreation. So this has been mentioned a couple of different times. This is a great program, and again, is district-wide. So these are all free programs. These are, over the last few years, have been grant-funded programs. So there's some great partnerships that happen there. Free programming to make sure that we can reduce that barrier to participation. We have drop-in programs throughout the district in parks, low-income housing units. We have a full-day camp that we hosted at Greenway this year, which was wonderful. And they go out and experience different field trips, splash pads, swimming. We had over 200 registrations in our full-day camp, which was wonderful and does help lessen the burden on those that need that care to go out and do the things they need to be successful for their family, but maybe can't afford it. And we work with a lot of different community partners. So we worked with houseless communities, like I said, the low income communities. We work with Beaverton School District, and then it's really the partnerships within Tualatin Hills. We rely on outdoor maintenance. We rely on, Conestoga opened up the doors and let us use the splash pad. We've gone to different pools. So making sure that the entire district is supporting these programs because they're so important to what we do. We do really targeted marketing in these programs. So we specifically market to Tualatin Hills scholarship recipients and then our previous community partners. So we make sure that those who really need these programs can take advantage. And then I think the biggest benefit to these mobile recreation programs is really reducing that transportation barrier. So we take these programs to the community, we don't expect them to come to us because not everyone can. So we do some very targeted mapping at the beginning of every year. Where are we already offering programs that people are paying for that maybe others can't? Where are we offering the majority of the programs throughout our district? And we specifically go and find those little parks and targeted areas to make sure that everyone can be served. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, mobile recreation has been grant funded for the last few years, but one of the grants we're going to spotlight tonight is a new grant to us, and it was the Oregon Community Summer Grant. It was a $400,000 grant, and it supported all summer programs. This grant is so exciting to us because it had very few limits. As you read through some of the bullets of the goals of this grant, we can meet those with a lot of our programs. So we were able to offer grant funding to volunteer programs, nature, aquatics, recreation, sports. Camp Rivendell was fully funded with this grant this year, which is wonderful for our disability community. Mobile recreation, there were some outreach events that happened that were through this, and then also able to do some scholarships. So this grant, like I said, was new to us this year. It was substantial, and it provided some really meaningful work, and something that we hope to continue into the future by building on these programs and knowing what we can do when we have the flexibility to spend the money where it's really needed. So this grant was wonderful this summer. Next slide, please. And then as a wrap up, anytime we close out a season, we're always looking at evaluating the programs that we have and how do we do better and serve more in coming seasons. When we evaluate programs, we have to look at everything that encompasses it. We, of course, we do electronic evaluations to our participants and those that signed up. We provide paper copies. We provide copies in different preferred languages if needed. But the reality is we get less than 20% feedback from our actual participants. So we need to broaden our scope and really look at how else do we evaluate. So we have pulled zip codes to see where are we getting the most registrations from. We look at and talk to the staff that work in the programs. We talk with our community partners and we meet their needs and expectations. And of course, we always look at registration numbers. Did people want to come back? Did people sign up and take camps in week 1 and 2, and then they later on signed up and came back week 7 and 8? So we are looking at all those trends and constantly evaluating our programs. A piece that was actually driven by our grant, the Oregon Community Grant that we got, was the demographic data. So we've started to dive into that a little bit more. As you can imagine, that data is fairly extensive. So we've just highlighted the top 3 responses in each category, but something that we are looking at internally of how do we capture that accurately when we have really low response rates, and how do we make people feel comfortable in giving that data to us, because we have to be a safe space for that to happen. Some of the highlights, we had over $96,000 in financial aid distributed. So those are free programs to the community that they were able to choose whatever programs they wanted, and we were able to support that work. And staff. We often forget what a big lift it is and how many staff it takes to hold a successful summer. So over 296 part-time staff brought on just to support all the wonderful summer work throughout the district. Volunteers, as Ann had mentioned, in our RISE program, 146 volunteers and over 2,400 hours put into camps just from volunteers. And then with our mobile outreach programs, which includes the fitness in the parks, nature, RecMobile Camp, and the RecMobile services, we had over 7,000 participants. So it is a big summer. It is really, truly a district-wide effort to pull off a summer, because we are not just in facilities. We are out in the parks, and we are out in the pools, and we are relying on transportation, relying on staff and volunteers and communications and getting our marketing out. So it is a truly district-wide effort to pull off a summer of this scale. So as we move into our next slide and take some comments, I just want to really wrap up with a big thank you to the entire district and all divisions, because while we take the registrations and we have the feel good, none of it happens without an entire district effort. So thank you, and we're happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you. That was great. And nice to meet both of you. Cedar Hills has a very special place in my heart. It's where I was a safety town instructor. I was a Cedar Hills camp leader, and it's also where I went to camp. So I feel like I grew up there. Any questions from folks? I think I have a quick one. The data demographics that you talked about, the demographic data that you had, was that based on the 20% response rate that you had mentioned? Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's really interesting. And the zip code stuff is really interesting too. And I see there are opportunities there. So thank you. No questions, just praise for Emily and Anne.
Lots and lots of praise. We use it every summer. I did it when I was little too. All three of our kids were able to do it this year because we did preschool this summer. So I was super excited. So all three kids it's a wonderful job. Those, I will say it is helpful that you guys keep sending out those evaluation forms because it's like the first time I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And then it's like the third one that comes in, I'm like, okay, I should do it now. So those repeat emails do work.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, Doug, you look like you want to say something.
No, I'm agreeing.
Doug's
with
ready
you.
to say goodnight.
We're there.
Okay, I think that's everything. I did forget to say major kudos to everyone who worked on the Bend trip, so thank you. I apologize for saying that late. Thank you for coming engaged and enthusiastic, and giving up your weekends because it was a wonderful weekend and an opportunity to break bread with staff and my wonderful peers. And I hope everyone has a lovely evening and good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.